Hello F11 members and welcome to issue 33, the October 2014 edition of the Chasing the Light online magazine, and the fundamentals of post-production video tutorials part 1 this month. I'm going to do a panorama. You may already have watched the accompanying video blog this summer on shooting this summer around and about in Wessex, in which case you'll have been on location with me in amongst the cows shooting Sherborne Castle in the mist. And what I'm going to do now is take you through the process of putting that panorama together. We have done this before in these video tutorials, but every shot is different, and so often with this post-production game it's not about how we do something, it's about why we do it. So I think this is a valuable exercise. So let's go through it. And I've selected these images here. You can see how many frames I've got there. It's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 vertical images to be stitched together. Now I've overlapped the exposures when I was making the panorama, and I have absolutely the same exposure for each and every frame. There it is up there. Focal length is 200mm at f22 at 0.4 seconds. So I'm now going to process these pictures as I would any other, with the slight restriction that whatever I do to one image, one frame, has to be done to all of these. So I'm just going to select the image that is of the castle, the frame sort of in the middle of the panorama, slightly to the right I guess, but it is the key position really, the castle itself. So as always, copyright information and caption information has been assigned during the import process. I showed you how to do that a month or two back. So let's go to the develop module here and think about what I'm going to do to this picture. And as always, first thing I look at, I'm not going to touch the color balance at all. I'm quite happy with that. I am going to go to this, the white and black clipping there, and I'm just going to adjust these a touch to ensure that the darkest tone in the image is not a sort of mid-grey, but a rich black, and the brightest part is a pure white. So just by holding down the Alt button and sliding the black slider to the left, I can see how far I can go before I start clipping blacks. Now just beware that that adjustment is fine for this frame, but may not be the case for others within the frame. So I'm just going to come back on that attachment just a touch. For safety's sake, I don't want to be losing any information, and I'm just going to tweak the whites a touch here, not much, just to the right there, to move this shoulder of the histogram to the right. And now I come down and I look at the point curve, and this is where I want to add a bit of contrast and make the image a bit richer, a little bit darker. We will be fine-tuning this picture in Photoshop subsequently when it's been stitched together as a panorama. So my adjustments at this stage are going to be pretty subtle. So I'm going to put something like a bit of a S-curve in there to put some contrast in, and move the curve down a touch to give me a darker image. And that's not bad. That's getting to where I want to be. I'm going to put a touch of vibrance in. Always be careful with this, but I think it can take a little. Plus 12 there. And now I come down here, bypass these bits here. Of course I'm going to do my sharpening. Sharpen scenic. Adjust my masking, hold down the Alt button and slide masking to the right, apply masking just to the area of the sky, really about plus 20 is going to do it. I come to my lens corrections, and if I go here, profile, and click on enable profile corrections, what Lightroom is doing is recognizing the lens I used. There it is, the EF 200-400 f4L-IS lens with the built-in 1.4 extender, and it's basically corrected the distortion of that lens, the distortion and the coverage of that lens. Now if you look at that, if I tick that on and off, there's very little difference between the two. That's why that lens costs so much, quite frankly. But I find doing panoramas using these profile corrections useful. It just helps with the stitching process later when we come to piece together the panorama. Generally speaking, in the normal course of events, I wouldn't be doing that with this picture, but because it's a panorama, I am. Next thing I'm going to do is I come to the graduated filter here, and the top of the image is pretty much washed out. The sky's not giving me any interest there at all, so I'm going to put a grad filter in here, and it's going to be a fairly soft gradation on the top of the image here, and this is where the grad will start. This is the midpoint of it, and this is where it will get to its darkest bit, and then it will be uniformly dark to the top of the frame. And at this point now I dial in my exposure to just darken that down. How much to go? Good question. I want a little bit of tone in that sky, so I think that's about right. I click on done, and at this point I'm finished with that particular frame. Now what I want to do is apply exactly those same adjustments to all of the frames that I'm going to stitch together now. So if I hold down Control and highlight, select the other images in the sequence that are going to be put together as a panorama, and now I come down here, bottom right, it says sync for synchronize. I click on that, and what it does is it applies all of these adjustments that I've made to that one central image to all the others. Click on synchronize, and there it's done. At this point I'm pretty much finished in Lightroom. So what I can do is go to Library, go Export, and I'm going to put these images in a folder here called Processed. Select that folder. If I come down here to my export diary, put in subfolder, I'm going to call it Sherborne Pano. And what do I want to rename these to? Yes, I do. We'll just call them SHER. I want the image to be a TIFF, and I want it to be ProPhoto RGB. You will have read, hopefully, last month's or lowdown on printing, or was it the previous months? I can't remember. Anyways, one of the recent months, one of the issues on the lowdown on printing, I was talking in depth about color spaces, so it would be worth going back and rereading that if you're unsure of the pros and cons of these three different color spaces that we can choose. ProPhoto RGB has the widest gamut, so for now that's what I'm going to convert the images into. No compression, 16 bits per color channel. I do not want to resize the picture. I will give it each image a resolution of 300 dpi. I've already sharpened, so I untick that box, and I'm going to ask Lightroom to open these images in Photoshop when it's done. So at this stage we'll export these images, and that's pretty much the first phase of stitching together panoramas, I beg your pardon. So let's just recap on what's important with this. First of all, do not be heavy-handed on the adjustments. The same is going to be applied for each and every one of these images here. So we have to be fairly subtle. Can fine-tune all of this later in Photoshop. Secondly, during the actual making of the individual frames, exactly the same exposure for each. Camera absolutely level. And of course, leave in more area to the image than is needed, because when it comes to it, we can always crop the panorama down. It's not as if we're throwing away vital information. We have plenty of pixels there because of the number of frames we've shot. So it's better to be a bit looser with your composition and then fine-tune it subsequently by cropping. The big difference, of course, when shooting panoramas is we can't see the finished composition through the eyepiece or on live view when we're there in the field. It all has to be envisaged in the head, which is part of the fun and part of the challenge. Again, lens profiles are useful, and synchronizing exposures. Synchronizing your develop adjustments is key to the whole process. So I hope that's clear. In part 2, we're going to take the image in all the individual frames in Photoshop and piece them together as a panorama. I'll see you there.